Welcome to Daily Global Motivation, the place where you rebuild your mindset and take control of your life. If you've been feeling stuck, lazy, unmotivated, like you know what you should do but you just can't get yourself to do it, then this video is for you. And it might be exactly what you need to hear today. Before we start, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and comment "I'm ready" below, because this is where things start to change for you. Now listen carefully. The truth is that motivation is not something you magically find one day and keep forever, but something that is built through action, discipline, and consistency over time. Most people wait for motivation to show up before they start, but the people who actually change their lives start even when they don't feel ready or inspired. If you can understand that one idea deeply, you are already ahead of most people who are still waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. This is not about being perfect or suddenly becoming someone else overnight, but about taking control of your decisions and refusing to stay where you are. You don't need a new life. You need a new standard for yourself and the courage to follow through on it. And by the time you finish this, you will understand exactly why you feel unmotivated and what you can do to fix it starting today. The reason you feel unmotivated is not because you are lazy or incapable, but because you have been conditioned to rely on a feeling that was never meant to be consistent in the first place. Motivation is emotional, and emotions change depending on your mood, your energy, your environment, and even the smallest distractions that pull your attention away. When you depend on something that unstable, your actions will always be inconsistent, and your progress will always feel slow or non-existent. You might have days where you feel unstoppable and ready to conquer everything, but those days are usually followed by days where you feel drained, distracted, and completely disconnected from your goals. That cycle creates frustration because you know what you are capable of, but you cannot seem to access it when it matters most. Over time, that inconsistency starts to damage your confidence and makes you question whether you are even capable of change. The truth is that nothing is wrong with your ability, but everything is wrong with the system you are relying on. When you build your life around motivation instead of discipline, you are building on something that cannot hold under pressure. Real growth requires something more stable, something that does not disappear the moment things become difficult or uncomfortable. That something is discipline, and until you replace motivation with discipline, you will continue to feel stuck no matter how many videos you watch or how inspired you feel in the moment. Another reason you struggle with motivation is because you are overwhelmed by the size of your goals and the pressure you put on yourself to change everything at once. When you look at how far you need to go instead of focusing on what you can do today, your brain interprets it as a threat and naturally tries to avoid it. That avoidance shows up as procrastination, distraction, and the constant urge to delay starting until you feel more ready. The problem is that readiness is not something that arrives before action, but something that develops because of action. When you wait for the perfect time, you are training yourself to delay progress and reinforcing the habit of inaction. Over time, this creates a pattern where thinking replaces doing and planning replaces execution. You start consuming more content about success than actually taking steps toward it, which creates the illusion of progress without any real results. This is one of the most dangerous traps because it feels productive while keeping you exactly where you are. The longer you stay in that cycle, the harder it becomes to break out of it because your brain gets used to comfort and avoidance. To fix this, you need to reduce the pressure you place on yourself and shift your focus from massive change to small, consistent actions. When you make things simple and manageable, you remove the mental resistance that is holding you back and make it easier to start. Your environment also plays a much bigger role in your motivation than you probably realize, because your surroundings either support your goals or silently work against them every single day. If your environment is full of distractions, comfort, and easy escapes, then staying focused will always feel like a constant battle. Your phone, your habits, and the way you structure your day are either helping you move forward or pulling you backward without you noticing. When everything around you is designed for convenience and instant gratification, it becomes incredibly difficult to choose long-term growth over short-term pleasure. This is not because you lack willpower, but because your environment is stronger than your intentions. To change this, you need to make progress easier and distractions harder, which means creating a space that encourages action instead of avoidance. That might mean removing certain apps, setting boundaries, or changing how you spend your time when you are alone. Small adjustments in your environment can lead to massive changes in your behavior because they reduce the need for constant self-control. When the right choice becomes the easy choice, consistency becomes much more natural and less exhausting. This is how you start. Building a system that works with you instead of against. One of the biggest hidden reasons you feel unmotivated is because you no longer trust yourself to follow through on what you say you will do. Every time you promise yourself that you will start tomorrow, wake up early, or stay consistent, and then fail to do it, you weaken your self-trust little by little. Over time, your brain starts to expect failure instead of success, and that expectation reduces your willingness to even try. You begin to hesitate before taking action because deep down you doubt whether you will actually stick with it. This creates a cycle where inaction leads to guilt, and guilt leads to even more inaction. Breaking this cycle requires rebuilding your self-trust through small, consistent wins that prove to yourself that you can follow through. Instead of setting unrealistic expectations, focus on commitments you can actually keep and repeat them daily. When you consistently do what you say you will do, even in small ways, your confidence starts to grow again. That confidence is not based on motivation, but on evidence that you can rely on yourself. Once you rebuild that foundation, taking action becomes less intimidating and more automatic. This is how you move from doubt to control, one decision at a time. You also need to understand that discipline is not something you are born with, but something you build through repetition and intentional effort over time. It is not about forcing yourself to suffer or pushing yourself to extremes, but about doing what needs to be done even when you do not feel like doing it. Discipline creates stability in your life because it removes the need to constantly decide whether you should act or not. When something becomes a habit, it no longer requires the same level of mental energy, which makes consistency much easier to maintain. The goal is not to rely on bursts of motivation, but to create routines that carry you forward regardless of how you feel. This is what separates people who achieve their goals from those who stay stuck in cycles of starting and stopping. Discipline is not exciting, but it is effective, and effectiveness is what leads to real results. When you embrace discipline, you stop negotiating with yourself and start executing without hesitation. That shift alone can completely change the direction of your life, because it turns intention into action. And once you experience the results of consistent action, you begin to understand that discipline is freedom, not restriction. Another powerful way to fix your lack of motivation is by lowering the barrier to starting. Because the hardest part of any task is almost always the beginning. When you set expectations that feel too big or too time-consuming, your brain naturally resists and looks for easier alternatives. Instead of aiming for perfection or maximum effort, aim for starting with the smallest possible step that moves you forward. That might mean working for just 10 minutes, writing a single page, or taking one simple action that builds momentum. Once you begin, you will often find that continuing is much easier than starting, because action creates energy instead of draining it. This approach removes the pressure that causes procrastination and replaces it with progress that feels manageable. Over time, those small actions add up and create results that are much bigger than you initially expected. The key is consistency, not intensity. because consistency builds habits that last. When you focus on showing up instead of being perfect, you create a system that supports long-term growth. This is how you turn action into a natural part of your daily life instead of something you struggle to begin. You must also stop waiting for the perfect moment, because that moment does not exist and never will. There will always be distractions, challenges, and reasons why today is not ideal, but waiting only delays your progress and strengthens your habit of inaction. The idea that you need to feel ready before you start is one of the biggest lies that keeps people stuck for years. Readiness comes from doing, not from thinking, and the sooner you accept that, the faster you will move forward. Every time you take action despite not feeling ready, you build confidence and reduce the power of fear and hesitation. This is how you train yourself to act instead of overthink, and that shift is essential for progress. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start, because the gap between where you are and where you want to be continues to grow. By taking action now, you break that cycle and begin closing the gap immediately. You do not need to have everything figured out, you just need to begin. And once you begin, you will realize that progress creates clarity, not the other way around. At the same time, you need to be honest with yourself about how you spend your time and where your energy is going each day. Many people say they lack motivation, but in reality, they are spending hours on distractions that drain their focus and leave them feeling unproductive. Social media, endless scrolling, and constant entertainment create a cycle of instant gratification that makes real work feel boring and difficult in comparison. When your brain gets used to quick rewards, it becomes harder to engage in activities that require patience and effort. This is not a lack of ability, but a result of how you are training your mind through your daily habits. To fix this, you need to reduce the amount of low-value activities that consume your time and replace them with actions that move you forward. This does not mean eliminating all enjoyment, but creating balance so that your time is not dominated by distractions. When you take control of your time, you take control of your results, because what you do daily shapes your future. Small changes in how you spend your time can lead to significant improvements in your motivation and productivity. And once you experience that shift, you will start to see how much control you actually have. Another important factor is the way you talk to yourself, because your internal dialogue has a powerful impact on your behavior and your level of motivation. If you constantly tell yourself that you are lazy, unmotivated, or incapable, you reinforce those beliefs and make them part of your identity. Your brain listens to what you repeatedly say and begins to act in alignment with those thoughts. To change your behavior, you need to change your identity by choosing a different narrative about who you are. Instead of saying that you are trying to be disciplined, start telling yourself that you are someone who follows through and takes action consistently. This might feel unnatural at first, but over time it becomes more believable as your actions begin to support it. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior reinforces identity, creating a cycle that can either work for you or against you. When you shift your identity, you change the way you approach challenges and decisions in your daily life. This is not about pretending, but about intentionally choosing who you want to become and acting accordingly. And as you continue to act in alignment with that identity, it becomes your reality. You also need to understand that progress is not always visible immediately, and that can make it difficult to stay motivated if you are focused only on results. Many people quit too early because they do not see instant changes, even though they are making progress beneath the surface. Growth often happens slowly at first, and then accelerates over time as your efforts begin to compound. If you expect immediate results, you will become discouraged and stop before you reach the point where things start to improve. This is why patience is such an important part of discipline, because it allows you to continue even when progress feels slow. When you trust the process and stay consistent, you eventually reach a point where your efforts start to pay off in a noticeable way. The key is to focus on the actions you can control instead of the results you cannot control directly. When you shift your focus to daily execution, you remove the pressure that comes from unrealistic expectations. This makes it easier to stay consistent and reduces the frustration that leads to quitting. Over time, those consistent actions create results that make the effort worthwhile. At some point, you also have to accept that discomfort is part of growth, and that avoiding it is one of the main reasons you feel stuck. Your brain is wired to seek comfort and avoid pain, but progress requires you to move in the opposite direction. When you avoid discomfort, you stay in your current situation, even if that situation is not what you want. Learning to tolerate and even embrace discomfort allows you to take actions that most people avoid, which gives you an advantage. This does not mean pushing yourself to extremes, but being willing to do what is necessary even when it feels difficult. The more you expose yourself to discomfort, the less intimidating it becomes, and the easier it is to act despite it. Over time, what once felt challenging becomes normal, and your capacity for effort increases. This is how you expand your limits and create growth that lasts. When you stop avoiding discomfort, you remove one of the biggest barriers to progress. And once that barrier is gone, your potential becomes much easier to access. You should also pay attention to your energy levels, because motivation is often influenced by how you feel physically and mentally throughout the day. Lack of sleep, poor nutrition, and constant stress can significantly reduce your ability to focus and take action. When your energy is low, even simple tasks can feel overwhelming and difficult to start. Taking care of your basic needs is not optional if you want to perform at a higher level consistently. This includes getting enough rest, staying active, and creating routines that support your well-being. When your body is functioning well, your mind becomes clearer and more capable of handling challenges. This makes it easier to stay consistent and maintain discipline over time. Ignoring your energy levels will always make progress harder than it needs to be. By improving how you take care of yourself, you remove unnecessary obstacles that are holding you back. And when your energy improves, your motivation often follows naturally. Another key point is that comparison can destroy your motivation if you are constantly measuring yourself against others without understanding their journey. Social media often shows highlights and results without revealing the effort, struggles, and time it took to achieve them. When you compare your current situation to someone else's outcome, you create unrealistic expectations and unnecessary pressure. This can make your own progress feel insignificant, even when you are moving forward. Instead of comparing yourself to others, focus on your own growth and how far you have come. Progress is personal, and your path will not look exactly like anyone else's. When you shift your focus inward, you reduce distractions and increase your ability to stay consistent. This allows you to build confidence based on your own achievements instead of external validation. Over time, this mindset creates a stronger foundation for long-term success. And when you stop comparing, you start improving. You also need to recognize that motivation often comes after action, not before it, which is the opposite of what most people believe. When you start moving, even in small ways, your brain begins to engage and create a sense of progress that fuels further action. This is why taking the first step is so important, even if it feels insignificant at the time. Waiting for motivation keeps you stuck, but acting creates the conditions for motivation to appear. This shift in understanding can completely change how you approach your goals and your daily habits. Instead of asking whether you feel motivated, you ask whether you are willing to take one small step forward. That question is much easier to answer, and it leads to action instead of hesitation. Over time, those small steps build momentum that makes bigger actions easier to take. This is how you create a cycle where action leads to motivation instead of the other way around. And once you experience that cycle, you will never rely on motivation. The same way again. It is also important to simplify your goals and Focus on what truly matters instead of trying to do everything at once. When your attention is divided across too many priorities, your progress becomes scattered and less effective. By narrowing your focus, you increase your ability to make meaningful progress in a specific area. This clarity reduces overwhelm and makes it easier to stay consistent over time. Choosing what to focus on requires discipline, but it also creates freedom by eliminating unnecessary distractions. When you know exactly what you need to do, you spend less time thinking and more time acting. This leads to better results and a stronger sense of direction in your life. Simplifying does not mean doing less, but doing what matters most with greater intensity and consistency. Over time, this approach leads to better outcomes and a more sustainable path to success. And when your focus improves, your motivation often follows. You should also remind yourself regularly why you started and what you are working toward, because a clear purpose can provide direction when motivation is low. When your goals are connected to something meaningful, it becomes easier to stay committed even when things are difficult. Without a strong reason, it is easy to lose focus and drift back into old habits that feel comfortable but unproductive. Taking time to reflect on your goals and the life you want to create can help reinforce your commitment. This does not mean relying on emotion, but using purpose as a guide for your actions. When you align your daily behavior with your long-term vision, your decisions become more intentional. This creates a sense of direction that reduces confusion and increases consistency. Over time, this alignment leads to progress that feels meaningful and rewarding. And when your actions have purpose, your motivation becomes more stable. At the end of the day, you need to accept that no one is coming to push you, save you, or force you to change your life. The responsibility is yours, and while that may feel overwhelming, it is also empowering because it means you have control. Waiting for external motivation or validation will only delay your progress and keep you dependent on things you cannot control. When you take ownership of your actions, you take ownership of your results. This shift in mindset is essential for breaking out of cycles of inaction and frustration. It allows you to move from blaming circumstances to creating solutions that move you forward. Taking responsibility does not mean being perfect, but being consistent and willing to improve. Over time, this approach leads to growth that is both sustainable and meaningful. And once you take full ownership, everything begins to change. Right now, you have a choice to make about what you do next and how you respond to everything you have just heard. You can close this video, feel temporarily inspired, and go back to the same patterns that have been holding you back. Or you can take one small action immediately and begin building the momentum that leads to real change. The difference between those two choices may seem small, but over time it creates completely different outcomes. Your future is shaped by what you do consistently, not by what you intend to do someday. By choosing action today, you set yourself on a path that leads to growth and progress instead of stagnation. This is not about making a huge change all at once, but about starting where you are and building from there. Every step you take reinforces your ability to move forward and creates confidence in your actions. Over time, those steps become habits, and those habits shape your life. And it all begins with the decision you make right now. If this message resonated with you and made you see things differently, then do not let that feeling fade without taking action that reinforces it. Subscribe to Daily Global Motivation so you can continue building the mindset that pushes you forward instead of holding you back. Like this video to remind yourself that you are committed to change and willing to take control of your life. Share it with someone who needs to hear this because growth becomes stronger when it is shared and reinforced. And most importantly, leave a comment saying "No more excuses" as a declaration of the standard you are choosing to live by from this moment on. Words alone will not change your life, but actions that follow those words will. This is your opportunity to move in a different direction and break the cycle that has been keeping you stuck. You have everything you need to start, even if it does not feel like it right now. Trust the process, stay consistent, and keep moving forward no matter how you feel. And remember, the life you want is built by the actions you take starting today.